One of the sad facts about the contemporary modern church today is that we have this great treasure of understanding and learning within our own tradition, but it is obscured by our own fascination with new ideas simply because they are new. To paraphrase G.K. Chesterton, as if Thursday is better than Wednesday simply because it's Thursday. It's as if someone has discovered this great wealth and they've offered a portion of it to us for free, this free gift. But instead of accepting that gift, we insist on digging in the dirt so that we can discover our own unique treasure, whether it's there or not, or preferring the supposed treasures of the modern world in the name of relevance, and then forcing it to try to integrate with a minimum amount of Catholicism so that we can continue to self-identify as Catholics, especially when it suits us. It kind of reminds me of this shampoo we have in our home, which brands itself as this natural honey blend, this moisturizing honey blend, and it's got honey on the label with one of those honey scoops and the honey's dripping down the sides. But if you actually read the label and look at the list of ingredients, the last ingredient, which is the ingredient that is used the least, is identified as honey, which means that they probably just put a tiny little drop of honey in their shampoo in the bottle so that they can use it in all of their advertising as if it's the most important ingredient. It seems like a lot of modern Christians and Catholics, especially Catholics, are doing this with their Catholicism. They're postmodernists or modernists or Marxists or liberalists with just a drop of Catholicism in there to give them permission to self-identify in that way. And I don't mean to blame people for this. I don't think people are necessarily consciously doing this. I think it's easy to be distracted by all the noise of the world we live in and never think to open this treasure that the church has curated for us. It's easy to be mistaken and think that a lot of the novel philosophical ideas that first appeared in the 19th century find their origin in the ancient church as opposed to the tip of a Napoleonic bayonet. And for whatever reason, I've encountered this a lot personally lately from people that, again, are probably well-intentioned and are earnest in their attempts to adopt and practice and portray Christianity in the work that they do, but are actually very sadly mistaken about what it is that the church teaches. The first person was someone who was denouncing a much-loved Catholic apostolate for having a mostly male staff in their employment. The other was someone who was more locally to me, who is known as a catechist in their parish, who said that the most important concept in Catholic social teaching is equity. And this concept of equity is unavoidable today, whether people who describe it explicitly as being somehow integrated and compatible with Catholic social teaching, or they imply it by saying that, a Catholic apostolate should have equal representation in both men and women, equal outcomes. And that's exactly what equity means. It means equality of outcomes. It means that when we take the measure of everyone's participation in society, we should all end up with the exact, or as close to as possible, the same benefits, regardless of input, cost, or the value that we contribute ourselves. And if anybody ends up with some greater benefit, then an unassailable absolute authority needs to step in and correct that disparity by force if necessary. So nobody should get more money, better grades, better looking spouses, or anything else that might cause envy in your neighbor. For those who sincerely think that equity is a good thing, what I think that they're grasping at is justice. And justice is vaguely and broadly understood as fairness. But fairness can be applied in varying degrees and can be understood in varying ways. And what I would argue that people who are obsessed with equity think fairness is literally a childish understanding of fairness. It's the habit of looking at two or more people who are deriving varying degrees of benefit out of their lives and saying, no fair, that person has more than this person has. It doesn't attempt to inquire any further about why that disparity might exist and if it's a just and natural consequence of the choices that the different people have made. And the reason that I say it's literally a childish interpretation of justice is because anyone who's been around children long enough or raised children of their own, they will have heard this phrase, sometimes screamed at them through tears. That's not fair. Like when some children eat all their dinner and get a treat for it, or when some kids do all their chores and get a reward, while others don't eat their dinner or don't do all their chores, decry the unfairness of their siblings' rewards. But what is right and true is that the children who don't eat their dinner don't deserve dessert, and the children who don't do their chores don't deserve some reward. True justice doesn't mean everyone derives the same benefits. It means that people should be given what is due to them. That's literally the definition of the virtue of justice, giving what is due. For example, if children eat their dinner before they get some dessert, then they've demonstrated that they've learned the necessary discipline about nutrition by placing what is good ahead of what is pleasurable, whether they want to do that or not. They've learned the lesson that what they want isn't always what's best. And so they've chosen to do the good thing prior to the desirable thing. Without that kind of discipline, the virtue of temperance, they could ruin their health. And I think we all know some version of an adult who hasn't learned those kinds of lessons, or maybe even ourselves in some aspects of our lives. We've developed some sort of a vice because we haven't been disciplined about temperance, about putting the good ahead of the pleasurable. And as a result, our appetite has come to dominate our will and our discipline. And because in the case of these children, because they've learned that they've demonstrated this discipline, we can be confident that when we do reward them with something pleasurable, it's not going to spoil them. But if you always reward children with a treat without ever having to cultivate that discipline, then they won't grow in temperance and they will never learn to control their appetite. Instead, their appetite will control them. And that's a sad state of affairs. And this is how you know that justice is a virtue. When it is applied properly, it will cultivate and develop virtues in the subjects. But if your attempt to address virtue creates vice, then you know it wasn't justice, because justice is a virtue and justice can't create vice. But equity would insist on this kind of injustice. It would either spoil the children who don't want to learn the discipline and virtues that they need to grow in healthy habits, or it would deny the ones who have learned those habits their just desert. And if we take a step back and try to take a more abstract look at the concept of equity, it isn't long before we see that it's quite incoherent of itself. Part of the reason so many people, I think, are receptive to this idea of equity is because we think it means equality. And most people agree with some approximation of the phrase that all men and women are equal. But if equity is a manifestation of equality, think about what you're admitting, what you're conceding the moment you insist that some higher authority has to step in and correct natural inequality. You're admitting that equality is not natural, that equality between human beings is not naturally occurring, and therefore we aren't actually equal. Now, some people will say that that correction is necessary because the system is rigged to produce that kind of inequality. And they might have a bit of a point, but I think we need to be more honest about this. Not all inequality is due to some sort of systemic injustice. If you were to take 10 people and all give them a plot of land with sort of a diverse landscape with some forest and some field, some people will cut those trees down and build themselves log cabins, and then they'll cultivate the field and plant crops and extract the most benefit that they can out of that opportunity. Some people will sit around and just do nothing, not because the system is rigged against them, but because some people make good choices and some people just make bad choices. And taking the fruits of the labor of the people who made good choices and giving it to those who didn't, that's not justice. That's the opposite of justice. But even if to some degree the system is rigged to produce inequality, the solution to that isn't to rig the system further. The solution is to give everyone as much equal opportunity from the outset as possible, to remove whatever impediments might exist to their just and good development. But equity advocates aren't promoting that. They're promoting reparations and redistribution of wealth. They're arguing that supposedly disadvantaged people need to be given advantages over other people. In other words, they want to give all children dessert, whether they eat their dinner or not, whether they make good choices about their nutritional habits or not, because of the small chance that some children might be allergic to their dinner. And I think we can all admit that there are some people, a minority of people, who genuinely need help from those of us who are able. But there are going to be many more people who in such a system will fail to do their best because they know they don't have to. They know that it doesn't matter. They will always get the same benefit and the same rewards no matter what. And far from promoting virtues like justice, would promote vices like sloth, envy, greed, and pride. And that can never be a consequence of justice. So that's what reason tells us about what's wrong with equity. But if you're a Catholic or a Christian and you're thinking, oh, but our faith tells us that equity is a good thing and that this is compatible with justice. Well, actually, no. Jesus himself in the parable of the talents tells us the exact opposite. He tells of this parable where there are 3 servants and their master gives them all equal opportunities to invest his wealth and to produce greater wealth out of it. 2 servants do exactly that. They make good on that opportunity and the master rewards them. 1 servant does not, out of fear or laziness or whatever, and is therefore punished as a result. That's justice, giving to them what is due to them. But equity rejects this parable. It says that all 3 servants should be given the exact same reward, regardless of the choices they make. And again, their choices are what makes them uniquely human, their will and their intellect being used to make free choices. Equity says that those choices and their humanity should be disqualified from the equation. But there's an ingredient in this conversation that I've been neglecting so far, and I can hear some Christians and Catholics saying, what about the role of mercy and of love? Because while justice may be the foundation of natural ethics, love is the highest of the theological virtues. And love and mercy implore us to forgive the failings of others and to show concern and care for those who struggle to access the same benefits that some of us take for granted. And this is, of course, throughout Jesus' teachings. We are called to care for the less fortunate. But love is an act of the will. Love that is coerced cannot be called love. If someone marries you with a gun to their head, can it ever be said that they married you out of love? Or what's the difference between physical love that is freely given compared to physical intimacy that is forced? I think we can all admit that there's quite a bit of difference in that. Love, by definition, has to be a free gift. The church and Christ himself calls us to perform acts of charity in order to grow in charity ourselves. Charity is synonymous with love in this sense. But if the state is in the habit of forcing you to give your wealth to others, then the formula of charity is broken in the process, because it can't be called a free gift of love when it is confiscated by some powerful force and then given to another, again by force. And this is the danger when people confuse and conflate concepts like justice and mercy or love. Justice can be enforced and still be what it is. For example, if a contractor and a customer agree to some work that is going to be performed for a certain price, and then the contractor goes and performs that work, but the client refuses to pay, well, then an injustice has taken place, and someone can come in through use of force to correct that injustice and force the client to pay. That is justice prevailing in that case. But if someone owes a debt to someone else, the person who the debt is owed to could, out of love, forgive that debt. And that would be a true act of love. But if someone more powerful comes along and forces everyone to forgive the debts of other people, well, that's not an act of love or justice. Neither takes place in that case. That's just the imposition of power and oppression. And that's why equity as a concept has no business being included in what we think of as social justice or mercy, because it is not just or merciful. And our natural reason tells us this, and the tradition of the Christian faith also tells us this. Thanks for watching. The reason I can continue making content like this is because of the generous support of my viewers. If you feel called to support this work, then consider joining the Reinforcements, which is my online community. There are multiple tiers, including free access for those who can't help financially but still want to join. You can join up at www.brianholdsworth.ca. Certain levels will also get a free gift basket from Glory and Shine, who is a family-owned Catholic bath and body products company whose beard balm I'm wearing right now. It's like aromatherapy for your face. Even if you don't join, they make amazing products, so check them out at gloryandshine.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe. You don't have to agree with everything I said to get value out of these kinds of conversations, so be sure to subscribe to be edified or challenged. There's value in both.